Hello apes and welcome to screencast number 6, and this is chapter 6, Ethics, Economics, and Sustainable Development. I am going to ask you to please make sure that you read the science behind the story. Do payments help preserve the forest? That is found on pages 144 through 145. And just to remind you, you should be reading the chapters as we go along. You should have your book open. As you'll note from this chapter, excuse me, I'm doing a lot of reading directly from the book on this, so you can follow along with me and pull out the notes that you need to take on this. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the neoclassical economies, and that's actually today's market system that we have. There are 4 fundamental assumptions of the neoclassical economics that often contribute to our environmental degradation. We've got to remind ourselves that neoclassical is going to treat resources as substitutable, and I can never say that word, and interchangeable. And what that means is that they can replace a resource because there will be other resources available that will take its place. With this idea, the goods and services are treated as free gifts of nature. And the thought is that they're infinitely abundant and resilient and substitutable. I said it better that time around. Okay, so that's what they're looking at. So are resources infinite and substitutable? That's the assumption that they are. As a result, we think of ecosystem goods and services as free gifts of nature, that they're endlessly abundant. The market imposes no penalties for depleting them, and they are assumed to be ultimately substitutable by human technology and ingenuity. What we know is that the material resources are ultimately limited. Our natural gas, our fossil fuels are an example of that. Non-renewable resources can be depleted, and those fossil fuels, the coal, do you know it takes hundreds and thousands of years for coal to be produced? So that's why it's considered a non-renewable resource, because it could never be replaced within your lifetime. We look at renewable resources as those that can be replaced within your lifetime. So these can be used up if we exploit them faster than they are replenished. And even though they may seem inexhaustible as resources, they can also become polluted so that we can never use them. The second thing is, are the cost and benefits internal? So we have to learn the difference between internal and external cost. If they're internal, that's the assumption that all cost and benefits are associated with the exchange of goods and services, and they're borne by individuals engaging directly in the transaction. And it is assumed that the cost and the benefits are internal to the transaction, experienced by the buyer and seller alone. Okay, so that's what internal means. And neoclassical economics says that it's internal. But costs of transactions that affect people other than the buyer or the seller, that falls under the category of external costs. And these are health problems, resource depletion, property damage that you're reading there, declines in desirable features of the environment. Fewer fish in the stream would be an example of that. aesthetic damage, such as air pollution or clear cutting or strip mining, and then declining real estate values where there's lost tourism revenue, higher healthcare expenses that result from the problems. So what happens is governments develop environmental policies to deal with the external cost, and they do this by making the taxpayers bear the burden of paying them. So Beijing, a couple of years ago, when they had the Olympics, pollution, I mean, not even just a couple of years ago, their pollution levels were really, really high. And we see this illustrated in this picture. The residents, this happens to be Indonesia, they're going through smoke from fires that are being used to clear cut forest for oil palm plantations. We're going to talk about palm oils and the foods that they're found in, and the destruction that is happening. So it's creating pollution like this. Should we discount the future? Neoclassical economics assumes that future events count less than the present ones. In other words, we shouldn't worry about future generations. So we discount. This grants an event in the future less value than the one in the present, and the future effects are discounted, and it's meant to reflect how human beings tend to grant more importance to present conditions than future conditions. So if I cut down the trees now, I'm going to make my money now. What difference does it make if there's no trees for future generations to cut down? Let them worry about what they're going to bring in. Policymakers tend to ignore the long-term consequences of the actions. They put cost of habitat degradation and resource depletion and pollution on to the future generations. So let your children worry about it. We're not going to worry about it now. The choice of what the discount rate to use is actually subjective and involves an ethical judgment. Do you think that this is ethically sound? What are your thoughts? So the fourth position on this is to look at growth, and is growth good? The neoclassical economics assumes that growth is good. So when we see economic growth, the increase in the economy's production and the consumption of goods and services, that's all good. It's necessary. We need it to maintain social order. It assumes that economic growth is essential for maintaining social order, because a growing economy can alleviate the discontent of the poor by creating opportunities for poor people to become wealthier. It promotes economic growth. It creates opportunities, but economic activity and true wealth are not the same. It doesn't come parallel each other in any way. So we talk about affluenza. Kind of sounds like the flu, doesn't it? So affluenza is where your material goods do not always bring contentment. You know, how many times have you ordered something, can't wait, you're so excited to get it, and then when you get it, it's like, oh well, I got it, you know. Not what I expected, I'm going to keep it, but oh well. And that's what affluenza is, a good example of affluenza. It's where you have a runaway growth that can destroy our economic system if resources are not limited. It's a path to greater human well-being. Again, that is subjective, and it involves an ethical judgment. When growth becomes an end in itself, it may no longer be the best route toward well-being. The way that consumption and material affluence often fail to bring people contentment, as we said, affluenza, People in poverty may feel poorer and less happy as the gap between the rich and the poor widens. So one of the things we talked about is globally. Where are we globally? And our global economy right now is 7 times the size it was just a half a century ago. Just 50 years ago, it's 7 times bigger than it was. Economic growth stems from 2 resources. 1, an increase in inputs to the economy, and 2, improvements in the efficiency of the production due to better technologies and approaches. This second approach that I just mentioned is where we produce more with less, is often referred to as economic development. Population and consumption still rise. We cannot sustain growth forever using the first approach. We've got to consider the non-renewable resources on the earth, that they are finite in quantity, and that there are limits on the rates that we can harvest renewable resources. We have to use technology innovatively to push back the limits and the growth, and we have to do this repeatedly, and this is what we've been seeing, is we have to continue to look for new technology, to reduce that. Can we conclude then that human ingenuity and improvements in technology will allow us to overcome all of our environmental limitations and continued economic growth indefinitely? Economists are answering yes, and environmentalists are saying no. Here is a microchip. These are computer chips, and that allows you to store more information in one small space than we used before, like on floppy disks or CDs. Look at how small your SD cards now are going into your cell phones. So we're downsizing our technology, so we're not using as much. We have a couple of views. One to the question that can we continue, and one is considered the cornucopians' view. In Greek mythology, the cornucopia was the horn of plenty, and it was a magical goat's horn that overflowed with grain and fruit and flowers. And the cornucopians are responding no. They believe that they are those that believe human ingenuity and improved technology will allow for continued economic growth. They tell us that human innovation and technologies and market forces increase access to resources to avoid depletion. The other thought are the Cassandras, and they're the ones who reply no to the answer. They are named after the mythical princess of Troy, and she had the gift of prophecy, and she had predictions that people did not believe. The Cassandra view actually says that the Earth's natural capital is finite, and continuous growth is not sustainable. And computer models are predicting economic collapse under the current conditions as resources become more scarce. So they're saying there are limits to growth, that we're going beyond the limits of this growth, and that we are just over-consuming. Okay, that's another one behind us. We're done with this is the sixth one, and we will continue on to the 7th, and we are getting close to the end of the chapter if you wanted to know how much longer. All right, see you in the next screencast.